Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're letting people into this meeting, and we'll get started in a few. Okay, so it looks like I'm not seeing any other people coming into the meeting room. I think we've got a really good crowd here with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Courtney Barton. I'm the Program Director for Arts and Culture and Racial Equity Initiatives at the Cleveland Foundation. Really excited to have this opportunity to debrief with you about the first round of the Cleveland Black Futures Fund and get started and give you some sense of what's going to happen from here on out. Joined this afternoon with some of our wonderful consulting team that has been really helping us at the Cleveland Foundation make sense of all of the data and everything that happened and all of the feedback that we have received about the first round of the Cleveland Black Futures Fund. And think about what the next round and the next round and the next round should look like. And this team is from Sangfua Strategies and Platform in Zenith. We are joined with Heather Lenge, Shruti Baz, Ariel Jordan, and Robin Hudson, who you will also hear from on this webinar. Shruti, can you share the slides? All right, so forgive me, I'm working on two different screens right now to make sure that I am on track with everything that we want to share with you this afternoon, because we do have a lot of information. But just to, I don't think are we at, this is the first slide? Do we need to back up a little bit? Yeah. All right, so an overview of our agendas. We've just done welcome and quick introductions. We're going to give you an overview of round one analysis work, which is, we got a lot of information in the first round of Cleveland Black Futures Fund grant making. And we were able to glean a lot of information from that that we would really like to share with you, what we have learned. Reflections on that first round, what we have learned, and what changes we have implemented for round two as a result. And then we want to have an opportunity to answer your questions. The next slide, please. So between June and November of this year, after we announced the first round of grant making from the Cleveland Black Futures Fund, we engaged this consulting team to help us answer a few questions. Is the video and microphone muted? This is a webinar session. I'm just going to answer this question really quickly. So participants or attendees are muted at this point. If you have questions, please drop them into the Q&A and we can answer them during the Q&A session. And that's because honestly, Zoom has limits on the number of attendees that can be in any one meeting. To get more attendees possible, we had to make a webinar function. We would love to see your faces, but unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to do that and have as many people as we have in the room presently. So just to let you know why we made this choice. Between June and November of this year, we engaged a consulting team to help us sift through the data and everything that we received in the first round of Cleveland Black Futures Fund grant making to help us answer the three questions that you see on the screen. How we can best support Black-led, Black-serving nonprofits, how we can improve our grant making process, and what went well in round one and where we need to improve. The next slide, please. So what did this entail? A formal analysis of all 221 round one applications. And I will talk a little bit more about the significance of that number, but it's a pretty significant number of applications that we received in very short order for the first round of Cleveland Black Futures Fund grant making. And the applications themselves are really helpful for us to understand the needs and current state of Black-led nonprofits in our region. In addition to just a deep analysis of the application data, The consulting team conducted 26 interviews and small group conversations, engaged 4 grantees, so 4 organizations that received grants, 22 applicants, so organizations that applied but did not receive grants, because we wanted to get perceptions specifically from applicants who did not receive grants. Interviewed Cleveland Foundation staff, so outside of me, who I've been talking about this whole time, but what other Cleveland Foundation staff understood to be the purpose and function of the Cleveland Black Futures Fund, board members of the foundation, non-applicants, because we wanted to get a sense of what barriers stood between organizations and applying for this fund, and then advisory committee members. We also sent out a survey. We got 110 respondents from the 221 applications. That's a 50% response rate, which is an extraordinarily high response rate for this type of research. You are doing really well if you get a fraction of that as a response rate. So thank you for sharing your views with us. So a little bit about the Cleveland Black Futures Fund and what we were attempting to accomplish with this fund. We announced the Cleveland Black Futures Fund last year as a first step in the Cleveland Foundation doing a better job of intentionally serving the Black community by serving Black nonprofit leaders, because we know that Black nonprofit leaders receive fewer grants and philanthropic support than leaders from other organizations, especially white-led organizations. And that is just a fact, not just in Cleveland, but everywhere else. And we announced that the Cleveland Foundation had allocated $2.5 million to this fund. As we have talked about before, that grew through the generosity of community donors. We did not pursue grants. Really, people came to us in order to support this endeavor because they believed in it. And during the 6-week period, a very, very short period of time, we received 221 applications for the Cleveland Black Futures Fund. I will personally say that I don't think I could have anticipated that we would receive hundreds of applications in a 6-week period, because it was a short application period. For context, Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, which is our county public arts funder, does about 300 grants in a full year. So we received almost as many requests in 6 weeks as our public funder will fund in an entire year. And when these applications came in, and all of the applications were compiled into PDFs for me to begin the initial review, I got several PDFs that were 900 pages long, which meant that the Cleveland Black Futures Fund was really speaking to a need that we clearly had not been speaking to previously. And that was incredibly validating. It was also incredibly daunting to think about how we would get through, again, doing almost as many applications to review as some funders will do in an entire year. And the entirety of the request was nearly $20 million. Now, the Cleveland Foundation, for a first step, and again, I will emphasize it was a first step, had allocated $2.5 million to the fund. We didn't know what we would get. But we see that the need was almost 10 times as high as the initial allocation. I know that you have received an email, for those of you that did not receive funding, that said that the primary reason why organizations were declined was because there was simply not enough funding available, not in round one for sure. And I want to reiterate that that is in fact the case. And not just for the Cleveland Black Futures Fund as a grant making opportunity, but broadly. If you are declined for a grant, don't internalize it as a statement of the value of your work, because there are a lot of other factors that have to be at play. In part, the amount that we have available, in part with the Cleveland Black Futures Fund, because we wanted to make it really, really evident that when we said we would fund new organizations and old organizations and organizations of every age in between and every issue area serving every population, that we made sure that our first cohort, and just the first cohort, of recipients did indeed reflect that commitment. And so it didn't necessarily mean that you did anything wrong. With that first round of grant making, we supported 49 organizations to the tune of $1.8 million, 38% of which were first-time applicants to the Cleveland Foundation. And that's something that I'm personally pretty proud of, because it can be very difficult for first-time applicants to a grant-seeking opportunity to receive funding. And I think that it was because we meant it when we said that we wanted to understand the value of the work and not make it a competition among grant writers, although we'll talk a little bit more about how we can be a little bit more helpful with the grant writing part. The next slide, please. So, honestly, thousands of pages of application materials later, survey responses, and a number of other ways to engage the applicants to this fund. And that is why we decided that it was going to be very important for this to be an intentional learning process, that we would evaluate what we did, what went well, what went wrong, and figure out the next step so that it's a step-by-step process and that we continuously improve and try to get better with every step of the way. And so with that in mind, I would like to invite the team that has helped to compile all of this data and help us analyze it to talk through some of the things that we learned in round one.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Courtney. Thank you everyone for being here. I'll get us started with talking about what we learned from the first round of the Cleveland Black Futures Fund here. The goal of this analysis was to understand the needs, strengths, challenges, and opportunities expressed by Black-led and Black-serving nonprofits in our region. We used the round one application as our data set. So with this, our team took some time to look across the written responses for each application. And today we're going to go through and share those results with you all. This analysis is important because up until now, there hasn't been a systemic research-based review of the needs of Black-led and Black-serving nonprofits in Cleveland. And we can use this data to better understand the needs of your organizations and to better align opportunities to these needs. So on this slide here, we can see the breakdown of applicants by type. And one thing we see here is that you all represent many different types of organizations. And another thing that we see here is that the Black Futures Fund was more likely to fund health and wellness, human services, education, arts and culture, and civic engagement type organizations than others. Next slide, please. And when we move into looking at your organizations by geographical area served, we found that many of your organizations provide services across multiple geographies, with most of you servicing Cleveland's east side and a vast majority of you crossing geographical boundaries and serving more broadly CMSD, Northeast Ohio, and Cuyahoga County. Thank you. One of the things we were able to dig into is facilities ownership. This is important because it gave us a sense of not only how Black-led nonprofits are operating, but it also gave us a sense of capacity needs. So consistently across you all, applicants, grantees, and first-time applicants alike to the Cleveland Foundation, you can see that about more than half of your organization's lease space, less than a quarter own, and many others are uncertain. Next slide, please. But regardless of facility status, your organizations describe the geography and communities being served based on 4 key factors: community need, financial limitations, available partnerships, and service delivery methods. One interesting thing we found specifically for those of you who said you were uncertain of your facility's ownership is that many of your organizations operate through a network of partners. This means that while your nonprofit might not be in one physical space, you are providing services through the spaces of several other existing nonprofits. Next slide, please. Overall, we are seeing that many of your organizations have pressing facility needs. Budget constraints, COVID-19, safety precautions, and the need to expand programming based on need drive whether or not your organization has a pressing facility need. Next, please. Another thing we looked at in this analysis is what populations are being served by your organizations. Here you can see the distribution of applicants in light blue and grantees in dark blue. Overall, we found that Cleveland Black Futures Fund is supporting families and communities holistically through its grantees. Thank you. We also looked at partnerships. 86% of your organizations reported utilizing partnerships to support your program delivery. Partners included other nonprofits, schools and districts, government agencies, representatives, agencies and representatives, faith-based institutions, colleges and universities, healthcare centers, and libraries. Next slide. And we saw that space, shared resources, referrals, and network and relational support were driving factors for these partnerships. So we'll shift gears here a little bit. We also took a look at the visions and values of you all as applicants. We found that regardless of any other factors, everyone here cherishes their communities, has a commitment to uplifting their communities and the members of their community. And there's an overall sense of being proud in who you are and being proud of what you are doing. Next slide, please. Also echoed throughout your applications, lived experience, commitment, relationships, network, innovation were all common strengths of your organizations that also supports what we heard in the visions and values. In addition to the strengths, we also took some time to look at the challenges and capacity needs that you all identified. And with that, Heather, would you like to share more about what we found?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ariel. So as Ariel said, we went through each of the applications that you all submitted and really read each line and started to think about what are the things that floated to the top in terms of the challenges that you all expressed, as well as the needs that you have in terms of capacity building. There were 5 things across all 221 applications between applicants and grantees in the first round that rose to the top. So here you can see those 5 things are staff salaries at 71% came as the top capacity building need. So we saw that in many of the applications, and we'll dig into that in just a couple minutes. Fund development also rose to the top, and we'll dig into what that means and what specific items were raised as a fund development capacity need. And then you see leadership development, marketing and communications, and strategic planning or long-term planning coming in at about 1/3 of you saying this is something that we really need in terms of building our capacity. I'm going to dig into each one of these pieces and start with staff salaries. So here you can see a chart that shows really the staffing circumstance of all applicants into round 1. And it was important to look at this because we can start to see the capacity of how many applicants have, at least 1 paid staff, if you all have full-time staff, part-time staff, if those are contractors. One of the things that stood out as well, 40% of your organizations are volunteer-led, 77% of all applicants to round 1 of the Black Futures Fund are utilizing volunteers to deliver services, which is an important piece to note in thinking about staff capacity. On the next slide, we dig a little bit into the staffing capacity of first-time applicants. So earlier, Courtney said 38% of the grantees and applicants into the fund were first-time applicants of the Cleveland Black Futures Fund. And so here what you can see is a big difference that stands out is first-time applicants were 20% more likely to be volunteer-led than the applicant pool at large. On the next slide, we start to dig into staffing capacity needs by type of organization. And what you see here is all of those blue bars are all the way over pretty much. And so what this tells us is that it really doesn't matter what primary service or type of organization you have, staffing capacity rises to the top across all organizations. We did the same type of analysis with fundraising capacity needs. And when we dug into the capacity building needs that you all have expressed around fundraising in the round one applications, we saw that, you know, the big part of this need was really planning and strategizing around fundraising. And so that involves a ton of different things. It's not just grant writing, but it's building relationships, it's finding grants, it's managing individual donors. And you can see again on the chart with the dark blue lines that this need is prevalent no matter what type of organization applied to round one. And on the next slide, we dig into leadership development capacity needs. And so again, about a third of applicants reported a need for this type of capacity building. And human service organizations, education organizations, and health and wellness organization types are the organizations who said this is a need that we have more often than others. And on the next slide, we dig into long-term or strategic planning capacity needs. And we put the terms long-term and strategic planning in here together because it's not really just one or the other. It's not that we just need a strategic plan. That's not what we heard. What we heard is something much deeper that you all expressed, and that is that long-term planning, strategic planning, there's a need to focus on growth. There's a need to focus on scaling because there's a significant increase in need for the programming that you all provide. And when we look across the different types of organizations that expressed long-term or strategic planning capacity building needs, what we see is health and wellness related organizations, human service related organizations are saying this is a need that we have more often than other types of organizations. And the last capacity building need that we'll dive into today is around marketing and communications. And marketing communications, again, a third of applicants said this is a need that we have. When we dug deeper, specifically what we heard from each of the responses that you all wrote in your applications is that it's marketing communications very broadly. It's about growing reach, it's about growing client base, building relationships, not just in the community, but also relationships with funders, relationships with donors, and also thinking about how to amplify the impact you all have through marketing. Okay. One other question that was in the round one application was around what was going on in your organizations throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And we spent a lot of time looking at these responses and started to pull out some key themes. And you'll see those key themes listed here on the slide around technology, around meeting increased need, around adapting and adjusting programming. That was named specifically in 7% of the and 7% of the across all the responses. But one thing that when we read each of the others, we thought this might be something that actually rose to the top more often, maybe just wasn't explicitly stated. So we included it here. We also saw, decreases in volunteer base, fluctuating staff levels, and also donor loss and opportunities to fundraise loss come out in your responses to this particular question. So everything that we've shared with you up until this point has really been around information that we gleaned from the applicant survey. And thank you all so much for filling that out. And then also a really deep dive into all of the written responses that you all provided in your application in round one. A second part of our work had to do with conversations. So I'm going to pass it over to Robin Hudson to talk through the stakeholder engagement findings.
Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As we not only reviewed information that you provided, we did have an opportunity to speak with Cleveland Foundation staff and other folks who had experience with the fund. Next slide, please. So what we learned and who we talked to as an overview, what we learned from folks, including you. We had 26 interviews and small group conversations, 17 Cleveland Foundation staff members were engaged. We engaged 4 grantees. So of the 22 applicants that we engaged, 4 organizations were actually awarded a grant. There's an advisory committee, and so we also talk to those folks. And then we actually talk to leaders in the community who chose not to apply for funding. What we heard overwhelmingly was that folks would love for this type of fund to not exist because equity has been achieved, basically, right? So that we know that Black-led organizations, white-led, and other led organizations all have equal access, equal opportunity, and are able to achieve funding at a level that is sufficient for their organization. Some of the perceptions that we heard really stem from applicants generally had a positive interaction with the foundation and with this process. And then some folks felt like while it was a great opportunity, they didn't have actually the capacity to even access it. So looking forward to sharing with you a little bit later, or you'll hear a little bit later, how some of those things were relayed. And when we talked about reflection and looking forward, there was general agreement that there's room for improvement in this process. And that's part of the reason why we're here today, is to just talk with you about what we have synthesized and, you know, from what we heard from you and other stakeholders, and how the foundation is going to make some changes with that. And so those processes include internal communications, all the way through to your experience as an applicant going forward in round 2. Next slide, please. So when we think about the process improvements that were elevated, one of the things that stands out that I think we're really excited to share is that there will actually be an FAQ for you. You will be able to just have a quick glance at some questions that you may have and have it as a resource that's there for you. There's going to be clarity around the parameters and the logistics and TA sessions and things like that. Internally, there will be grassroots leaders who will also be on the review team. So bringing in your peers and colleagues to also, you know, have an eye on making the decisions around funding. The application process, right? So understanding that while it was difficult, and as Courtney said earlier, because of funding restraints, this time knowing that it's going to be important to have a multi-step process, and that you'll be informed along the way, you know, each step, knowing that the parameters will be available to you so that you know exactly what the foundation is going to do in round 2. Next slide. And when we think about the community engagement aspect of making improvements, we heard loud and clear that you all want the foundation to support networking and to create opportunities for nonprofit leaders to build relationships with foundation staff, which is really exciting. So more to come on that as well. And then we also took a look at what you identified as some needs. And I think Heather called this out earlier around like long-term strategic planning. And there is talk about creating sort of a leadership development opportunity for you to be with your peers and colleagues in this work and learn from each other and have a facilitated process that will support your development as leaders. And finally, I think that the other thing that really stands out is that, you know, creating this shift from tell us what you need in an application, so the foundation just saying, tell us what you need. The foundation was really thoughtful in saying, now this is what we have, right? So we can manage your expectations so that we can make sure that the process is more comfortable for you and that the experience is a little bit better communicated, I guess, in terms of how many grants. So you're going to hear numbers, you're going to hear amounts, you're going to hear number of grants and categories and things like that as we move forward, just so that it doesn't feel like you're just going into this without knowing what the foundation is actually prepared to do, so that hopefully it will be a better experience for you going forward. I'm going to toss it back over to Courtney to round us out and take us home.
Thank you so much. So that was a lot of information. It was a lot of information for you to hear very quickly. It was a lot of information for us to analyze, but we want to create these sort of, analyze the themes of what we heard and what we read in the applications and the interviews and the survey responses to influence what the next steps of the Cleveland Black Futures Fund will be. As we have stated from the very beginning, first step in a long-term process of doing a better job of serving Black-led nonprofits. And it's iterative. So we take a step, we learn from it, we take a step, we learn from it, and so on. So this is what we have learned. These are the themes that we have pulled out, and these are the ways that we will try to implement these themes in the next round. And we want to share this with you all first, because this information came from you. You were the ones who helped us to learn all of this about Black-led nonprofits, half of whom had never had a previous relationship with the Cleveland Foundation. We are learning from you. It was loud and clear that this can be an opportunity for us to create communities that will promote overall well-being of Black-led nonprofits working together, collective work, collective action, the community, which as referenced was the thing that stood out the most, that everybody is in this for community. So this means creating cohorts for grant recipients, spaces to learn from each other, because there are so many organizations doing such phenomenal work that you all can share with each other, and we can help to facilitate that. This includes peer learning models, leadership development, marketing communications. Along these lines of the most salient needs, we can help facilitate some cohorts. And then create some spaces for just general networking, because there were 221 unique organizations that applied. That is 221 peers in the work who have valuable lessons to share with each other, and we can help create the spaces for you all to meet and get to know that the work that you all are doing, because we saw again loud and clear that partnership was important to everybody. Streamlining the process for both applicants and for staff. Again, I think I mentioned we got more applications, or almost as many applications as CIC will fund in a year. There are no processes that currently exist at the Cleveland Foundation to handle that number of applicants in a short period of time. They don't exist. We had to make them up as we went along. And they didn't quite work out for us in the same way that they didn't quite work out for you. And so we want to make it better for everybody. That means making the application more manageable for you to fill out and for us to analyze. In round one, we did what we called office hours, where people were able to sign up for some time with me. And that might have been helpful in thinking about the application kind of broadly, but not necessarily helpful in filling out the application when it came time for you all to sit down and fill out the application itself. So we're thinking about how we can create technical assistance opportunities to help you through that in a much more accessible application. Internal and external structures that lift organizations up. Again, I think has been referenced that this is like the largest data set that exists on Black-led nonprofits in our region, period. Thank you for sharing all of that with us, because that gives us information is a powerful tool that we can use to share with other funders on what our Black-led organizations need. We can think about better ways that we can share other funding opportunities with you. We can think about whether there are learning opportunities that we can help support and make available to all of you that will be helpful. And then broadly, thinking about what is the vision for the Cleveland Black Futures Fund. At first, it was a response to an extraordinary year, which really was the culmination of many years of decline, unfortunately, for Black communities. But we don't want to stay in the space of remediating decline. We can think forward to what this could and should be. And given that this is intended to be a long-term fund to connect organizations, Black-led nonprofits to the Cleveland Foundation, if we continue in the same vein, we will have connected 300 to 400 Black-led nonprofits to Cleveland Foundation funding sources in a 5 to 6 year period, which is extraordinary. And that is going to help create longer term funding relationships, resource relationships, and opportunities that are really kind of one necessary, overdue, but really exciting to think about. Next slide, please. All right. So to get into the nitty gritty of the things that we want to do better for round 2, we're going to give you an application that is designed for your ease. More clarity about how applicants are chosen. I do want to stress that oftentimes, really and truly, if it is a lack of funding that makes the difference, not just for this opportunity, but other opportunities, it's impossible for us to really have 200 individual conversations with grant seekers, but we will try to give more clarity and more information as we possibly can about how applicants are chosen, communication and feedback, the peer learning opportunities. Key changes that will be really important for you to think about, because as we've said, we hope that round 1 was the beginning of our relationship with you, not the end of our relationship with you. We want you to come back to us. There will be 2 grant opportunities in round 2 rather. You're hearing it here first before anybody else outside hears it. One will be for a monetary grant award, and everybody needs money to support their organizations. But we also talked about capacity building and what that could mean. So an intentional capacity building fellowship grant opportunity that would pair a form of monetary support with coaching in a cohort model around some of the areas of key need that were identified in round 1. More technical assistance workshop sessions so that you can just see a little bit more of the nitty gritty of how the application process will work. But again, grant writing assistance, because again, in round 1, people had the opportunity to talk one-on-one with me, but when it came down to filling out the actual application, people really wanted more guidance than we had the capacity to give. We can't review proposals before we receive them. But knowing that so many applicants were first-time applicants to the Cleveland Foundation, we believe that it's very important for us to be able to create some opportunities for you to receive assistance from grant writers to help with the completion of the proposals. Next slide, please. All right, so some key upcoming dates to keep in mind, and then we will start answering questions. So if you haven't put your questions in the Q&A or the chat yet, please do so. But these are the dates. On November 15th, round 2 will launch, and we will have a webinar at 5 p.m. to walk through the application and talk about what round 2 will look like. The application will open that week, the week of November 30th. After Thanksgiving, we will begin with the technical assistance workshops. And you will be able to sign up for a workshop, attend to get some nitty-gritty overview of how the application process and the budget should work, how you should complete that. We will have opportunities that will run between November and January for you to attend application technical assistance workshops, because we are giving a longer application period for round 2. Next slide, please. Just so you know, the application period will run until January of 2022 to give people more time, considering that we have the holidays coming up. We want you to be able to access technical assistance and grant writing assistance. More information about how to access those resources will be coming out to you. Between January and March, we will be reviewing applications so that we can get you decisions by April for the next round of Cleveland Foundation Black Futures Fund funding. I hope you have questions in the chat. I've seen multiple times people asking for these slides. We'd be happy to share slides with you. What else? The actual January deadline will be, is it January 18th? January 18th is the deadline, so that you'll have plenty of time between now and January to get applications done. Clarity on the different type of grant opportunities. Outright monetary grant, right? And we will provide more information. We want to make sure that we give it all at once. I don't just want to talk through it without being able to show it to you, but we will talk more about it at the launch event and webinar. And if you're not able to attend that, we will make it available to you afterwards about what the 2 different grant opportunities will be. But one will be an outright monetary grant that the organization can utilize to support the work that they need. The other part will be maybe we really just want to focus on some of these capacity building specific things, and we need a coach to help us with it. And we would be interested in doing this in a cohort with our peers. And so that will be the other grant opportunity, right? To participate in a peer cohort with a coach to work on a specific capacity need. And more information will be forthcoming. Round 2, invitational only. So round 2 of the Cleveland Black Futures Fund will be available not just to round 1 applicants. Round 1 applicants can reapply, and we're working on the system for round 1 applicants to reapply. And new applicants will also be available to apply. So it's not just by invitation only. Your questions are coming fast and furious. Thank you. I'm so great. Can we use our previous grant? I would certainly encourage you not to necessarily reinvent the wheel, but if you have questions about your previous proposal, look out for the grant writing assistance technical, grant writing assistance opportunities, and utilize that to work with a professional on your previous grant for your round 2 application. Let's see, in the Q&A, we are fiscal agents for Black-led organization as they did not have 501c3 status. However, since then we have been able to get it approved. We have so far spent only about 15% of the grant. Can we hand over the unspent funds to them? That sounds like a question that you should reach out to me directly so that we can discuss. Will the application workshops cover the same topics or different ones? The technical assistance workshops will be designed to answer more or less the same questions, but there will be plenty of opportunity for the participants to raise topics, right? And to work with each other and talk with each other during the technical. So they might not all be exactly identical depending on the needs of the people in the room, but the same topics of information will be covered. You do not need to attend multiple technical assistance workshops. One should be sufficient. Are the individual grant amounts the same as round 1? One of the areas where we will provide greater clarity for round 2 will be in the amounts of the grants. In round 1, we didn't really know what it was that we were going to get, right? Like what people would say were their needs and would not say as their needs. Now that we have a sense of the flavor of like what organizations really need, that the average request was around $89,000, et cetera, we can plan and say that we can provide maybe 5 grants of up to $100,000 and 10 grants of this range and X grants of $25,000 that we hope will give you greater clarity in calibrating your grant request. But I want to make clear, what did not disqualify anybody was asking for more than we could provide. Nobody got declined a grant because they asked for more than we could provide. Nobody, not one single organization. You calibrate your request. But what we will try to do is match what we have available to the needs of organizations, and we will continue to do that. Can an organization apply for both the monetary and the capacity building grant, or do you have to select only one? That's a really great question, and I think that's something that we have to work out. I would suggest you prioritize what it is that you want to apply for, whether it's the capacity building or the monetary grant, because it's unlikely that we would be able to do both for an organization. And that's with regard to, I think, just about any grant making opportunity. Honestly, you don't want to submit like multiple applications for one organization in one round, because what's going to be really helpful for any grant maker is if the organization identifies what their top need is, they need the grant maker to meet. Because we can take your lead. In many ways, we took the lead of the overall pool in figuring out what round 2 needed to look like and beyond. We're going to need you to give us your indication of what your need is in round 2, your top need as well. Let's see. Will there be a funding cap on the grants? I think we just talked about that, where we will give you more information of the range of grants that will be provided. In the webinar, will you be discussing expectations for criteria, for example, the amount of detail and outcome of projects? For that, I would suggest you sign up for a technical assistance workshop and or for grant writing assistance to give you a little bit more of that, because we won't be able to do that for everybody right? And by doing the technical assistance and the grant writing assistance, we are hoping to provide more guidance specifically tailored to the needs of individual organizations. Will these questions and answers also be made available? We will make this session available to you. That is part of the reason why we are recording it, so that you can have this information. Other foundations allow grantees to apply once a year. I think other foundations may apply organizations to receive a grant once a year, which is what we are doing this time around as well. If you received a grant in round one, you are not eligible for round two. If you applied in round one and were declined, you are eligible to apply for round two. Applicants who received a grant in round one will be eligible in subsequent rounds that will push you out to that year mark. Will the grants be distributed into the same categories? By categories, you mean nonprofit organizations. We are open to any category of nonprofit organization. So the answer to that question is yes, and we may see if new categories will emerge based off of the organizations that apply. Can you request under $25,000? I would say that there's probably not really a floor to the amount that would be given. But I would also suggest that you think about applying or using the technical assistance workshops and the grant writing assistance to think through what you would really need in order to fulfill your request. Yeah, like utilize the time to think carefully through your budget. And we know that the budget issue is really tricky for people. And that is one of the reasons why the technical assistance workshops will focus on the budgets. What will the selection process look like? What would a quality applicant look like? So there are a couple of things that I would want to say about the concept of a quality applicant, because I think there are a couple of levels that you can answer that question on. Applicants who were declined were not necessarily not quality applicants. And I just want to make sure that everybody truly understands that people were not declined because they weren't quality applicants. But what we will do for round two is utilize a method to help us communicate to grantees or applicants after the fact about what the review teams understood to be the fullness of the answers to the application questions, right? Like a rubric that says, you explained this, you explained that very well, or we didn't get enough information here, or this answer was not fully explained. With regard to questions of quality, as a Black woman who works in philanthropy, I think I hear very often that Black-led nonprofits receive feedback from foundations that say that their applications were not good enough, or they didn't demonstrate this, or they're not polished enough or professional enough, or these sorts of things. And that is not what we are looking for in the Cleveland Black Futures Fund. What we want to find are organizations that have been doing the work, that haven't been getting the support, and that we can help to get that support in doing the urgent work that the community needs. That's what we are looking for. That's what makes overall a quality applicant, that you are a Black-led organization that is doing the work that needs to be done. And we have to make some hard choices about how to best support. But this is also where I say, like, don't give up, right? Like, if you don't get a grant in round one, and if you don't get a grant in round two, come back in round three, because we mean to be here for the long term. We do want this to be a mechanism where we said with our goal in the 5 to 6 year period to begin to introduce a few hundred Black-led organizations into the Cleveland Foundation funding community so that we can connect you to other resources. And this is our first step at that. I hope that was a helpful answer to that question, because I just know that when people talk about quality with regard to, grant applications and Black-led nonprofits, we can be treading down some lines that really speak to the systemic inequities that affect the philanthropic sector. And this is an opportunity for us to work on the systemic inequities in the philanthropic sector as well. And it's a first step, but it's important to acknowledge that. What exactly did disqualify an applicant if not a funding cap? As we said, we had $20 million in requests and we only have $4.5 million in the fund, almost $4.5 million in the fund. And we wanted to make sure that we were serving organizations that were working in literally every issue area that was represented in the pool, and every population. This is young people, this is disabled, this is the homeless, this is the LGBTQ, this is men and women, the formerly incarcerated, everything. We were trying to balance literally every need that our community had in a 6-week period. And I want to say personally that I know that people have communicated to me that it hurt their feelings to receive a no, but it hurt my feelings to deliver a no in round 1, because there were so many organizations that were doing such important work that we simply did not have the resources to do in round 1, but that we are working diligently to be able to secure for round 2 and other rounds as well. So I wish I had an answer that was a significantly more, I can point to this line for any organization and say, this was the thing that disqualified any one organization. It's just not possible. Not possible. And we don't have systems of feedback to be able to handle any one person giving such feedback to 221 applicants, well, like 180 applicants. We simply don't have it. But we are going to try to build systems that give you more information and keep you more connected and communicate more regularly and thoroughly so that you can understand what the process will be. And we did the first round of grant making and we learned a lot. And we're going to do the second round of grant making and we're going to learn a lot. And we're going to try a few things that we hope will better serve the needs of all of our applicants. And we're going to learn, and some of them are going to work and some of them aren't going to work, but we're going to analyze those too and hopefully come back stronger for round 3. Can applicants continue to apply for other CF grant programs even though they are applying for CBFF? Yes, throw your hat in every ring that you are qualified to throw your hat in the ring for. And I mean that not just the Cleveland Foundation, but literally every other grant making opportunity, throw your hat in the ring. Are the application questions going to be the same as with the first application? Basically, yes, but we want to give you like more check boxes and opportunities to do that as opposed to developing narrative, just to make it quicker and easier for you. If you receive funding in the first round, are you eligible to be a part of the learning cohorts? Come back to us in round 3. Can you restate eligibility for grantees, those funded from the first round for this new round, round 3? Round 3 for those who were funded in round 1. Will there be a rubric available for the grant? Yes. Can organizations granted funding in round 1 attend technical assistance for the round 2, even though we can't receive funding in that route? You mean the application session technical assistance? I mean, I guess you could. I don't know that there are any like caps on the number of people that can attend a Zoom webinar. They will all be via Zoom. Oh no, I take it back. There are some caps. Space will be limited. But what I would say is that I don't think that it would be useful for you to attend. And that is because this is an iterative process, these workshops are going to be geared towards round 2. And if you are thinking that you're going to attend the technical assistance workshops and get ready for round 3, I would say just wait until we get to round 3 so that you will get information that is tailored to round 3, because that's what we're trying to do, give tailored information that will really help you through the process as opposed to general information. Oh, additionally, so that you know, these technical assistance workshops, we do want them to be like deep, small group conversations, not in this webinar format where I'm just talking at you, right? Like, again, we wish we could have done like a Zoom meeting where we could have cross exchange, but we have like 100 people in this room and Zoom doesn't give you the capabilities to do a meeting with 100 people. You have to do webinar format, but we want to be able to foster that with the technical assistance. Has the pool of dollars raised for the CBFF increased since last year? We have actually raised some more money, and we have a little bit more money that we hope, fingers crossed, that will be awarded to the fund. What I will say, and it was kind of touched on, is that we didn't really have a fundraising plan for this. People kind of showed up because they cared. And one of the things that we know we need to do moving forward is to come up with an intentional plan. I will also just note that the Cleveland Foundation will continue to consider our own contribution to this fund, as well as fundraising from other sources. So, will there be restrictions for organizations with annual budgets in excess of an established level? That's a really great question. One of the things that we learned, and this will be talked about more in the launch event, but that the greatest need was for organizations with budgets of under $1 million. So that's where we're going to focus for round 2, organizations with a budget of $1 million or less, which is the vast majority of organizations that applied. Will there be capacity building supports for round 1 grantees before round 3 that address some of the insights? Yes, there will. Some of that is still in development though. We have been, as a staff at the Cleveland Foundation, evaluating a number of ways in order to provide that sort of capacity building support. A few resources that we have been exploring and other things as well, but we'll need a little bit more time before we can begin to roll that out. I got a 2-minute warning, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm just sort of like rapid fire talking, but I just want to make sure I get as many questions answered as possible. Are there efforts on sustainability for nonprofits? What do you mean by sustainability for nonprofits? Are you coordinating your work with United Black Fund? I early on have to say that when I was thinking about starting this Cleveland Black Futures Fund and talking to the United Black Fund was obviously the first organization I called. United Black Fund has been doing this. And they have been supportive and helpful, and we hope that there will be more intentional ways to work together, but certainly love United Black Fund. If you serve more disenfranchised groups, will that give your application more consideration? Authentically serve who you serve. I wouldn't worry about necessarily trying to target or just tell us what you are doing and what's important to you. That's the most important thing. Being able to sustain the work we are doing after the impact of COVID-19. I think that that's what we're trying. That is the goal of the fund, right? Is to be able to help nonprofits work towards sustainability. If there's a specific question in there about something that is like plaguing or bothering or on your mind, reach out so that we can talk about that specifically. All right, 1 minute. 1 minute left. I'm sorry towards the end. I really felt like, a little too rapid fire, but again, we'll make this available so that you can see this. We hope we'll see you at the launch event. Hope we'll see you at the technical assistance webinars if you are applying for round 2. And if you are a round 1 grantee, look out for more information tailored for you. I am so glad that you all found this to be helpful. I want you to know we've been listening and doing a lot of work to make this a good experience for all of you. Thank you for joining us. And there's a session evaluation. Let us know what you thought of this session, please.